Radio 247.
Radio 247. Non-stop prayers.
It has been said that failure is a result and success is also a result. Both have nothing to do with chance. A teacher used to say, when you fail to plan, you have planned to fail. Let us go on to learn the secrets, both spiritual and practical, that will deliver success in this new year, this new season of our lives.
Matendo yako yashangaza wengi, miujiza yako tumeiona kwa macho. Ndio maana tutakoma kulisifu jina lako. Ndio maana tutakoma kulisifu jina lako. Hakuna mwingine.
This is a lesson Africa needs to learn, that failure is a choice and success is a choice. Stop thinking it's by luck or by chance. Come with me, let's learn the principles in the program Planning for Success.
Yes. Hello, Africa. These are the days of liberty and freedom. It's a new season. It's a new year. It's a new time. It's a new age. The past is gone. Yesterday has been tidied up, rolled into today, and there's a tomorrow ahead of us. I call upon our people in Algeria, talking to our brothers in Botswana, Burkina Faso, the Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, joining with the people in Tunisia, calling out and a shout out to Tanzania, to Sierra Leone, South Africa, the Southern Sudan especially, our people in Rwanda, men, women, brothers, sisters, all families gathering together from Equatorial Guinea, from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from Mali, from Malawi, Madagascar, Namibia, Nigeria. And I tell you something, it's time for us to go before the Lord, because the game changer is here. "54 nation states, 10 dependent territories of the African experience." I tell you, the beginning of a new year for nations, for persons, is that season where the tide of hope rises to its peak, its greatest height. This is the time when nations are looking back and they're doing what we call stock taking. Families gather together, look back at the year gone by, decades gone by, taking stock of what has been, looking forward with projections to what can be. It's the time for aspirations. When you look into the new year, look ahead of you, and the days ahead begin to hope and look for certain things that will mark and be those Ebenezers that will make that year memorable. It's time for us to look at resolutions. This is that season when people look at resolutions, list them, talk about them, psych themselves up, whether it's a nation, a family, or a person. It is an exciting time. However, 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories of Africa, I want to say to you that there is a predictable pattern every new season, every new year. And when that predictable pattern begins to unfold, I must tell you the truth, 54 nation states of Africa, 10 dependent territories, it often, before the end of the year, brings great disappointments when unanswered prayers begin to pile up, unmet aspirations, unattained hopes, unfulfilled dreams too, covering the rest of the year like a dark cloud. This is the reality that many do not want to face. Because the interesting thing about mankind is that we are wired in such a way that we are able to blot out all these negative records year after year, decade after decade. Somehow Africa, 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories, we block them out, only to generate a fresh excitement when another new year comes around and the hopes again begin to unfold. Bible says in Galatians chapter 6 verse 7, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. Whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. And that's why I want us to start out with a prayer today. 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories of Africa, we remove our destiny from the field of luck this year. Has nothing to do with chance. We must not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. He that established the heavens and the earth has spoken his word, and they cannot fail. It's time for us to talk to God that this year, this new season, will be profitable, because we will learn of God, we will learn of his seasons, we'll understand the times, we'll unfold the mysteries, we'll put them to use, we will establish righteousness, and there shall come a harvest this year and the years to come, a harvest that will not surprise us by reason of his bounty and its goodness, because we started out knowing that it would be a different year altogether. Father, this we look to you for, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Now, before we continue, I want us to start this new year with a word of caution. We will not be here forever. Whether you are a president, a pauper, a beggarman, a doctor, a business person, none of us will be here forever. 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories of Africa. We will not be here forever. It's called the mystery of time. We cannot be here forever. When we look to the Most High, we must understand that sometimes time and life, like a stream, must run its course. And that's why we must have this consciousness that we must spend our time with understanding, knowing that we are spending our lives. We must spend our time with understanding, knowing that we are spending our lives. If you keep spending your life without investing it in anything, the expected harvest will be zero. Why don't we join hands and hearts together across the nation states of Africa, beginning to trust the Lord that this time around in this year, we will not just spend our time, we will not just spend our lives, we shall be investing. We shall be investing, because investments bring expectations. Expectations will bring the harvest. Let us begin to talk to God, asking him, O Lord, Father God, help us, O Lord, in Ghana, Eritrea, Ethiopia, in Gambia, in Guinea, in Kenya, Lesotho, Liberia. It must be different this year. We shall invest. We shall invest. We shall not just spend. Our lives are our time, and our time is our life. Help us, O Lord, to invest this year All we want to do is to invest, knowing full well that the expectations of the righteous will not be cut off. Help us, O Lord, to invest wisely, to invest our time wisely, to invest our lives wisely, our energies, everything that you have given to us in Africa, everything with which you have blessed us, that instead of spending, we become nations that invest in the future. Father, thank you, for we believe that you hear us in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. And that's why I want us to continue in prayer as we look and say, let us approach this new season, this new day, this new dawn, this new year. Let us approach it with wisdom. The Bible says, get wisdom, get understanding. The Bible tells us that wisdom is the principal thing. I want us to first of all start out this year in Africa, acknowledging that there are two major constituencies that have been subject to satanic constraints in human history. Before we rush out again and go after the things that are almost predictable annually, I want us this time around to settle down first of all, knowing that in the realm of the spirit, the greater contains the lesser. We'll break that down later on, but let's just work with it for right now. It's a spiritual truth. The greater contains the lesser. But when you look into human history, there are two constituencies that have been subject to satanic constraints in human history. The first of all is womankind. The oppression of women is a documented global affair. There seems to be an invisible information thread across the nations of the world through history that brings oppression to womankind. And in many nations of the world till today, women are considered to be second-hand citizens. Now, apart from the constituency of the feminine gender, you will discover that the second notable category of persons, the second notable constituency that has been subject to satanic constraints in human history is what we can best describe as the African experience. Before we rush off into the year again, rushing into the predictabilities, the things that have not brought us much relief in the years gone by, let us acknowledge this truth. Despite the wonderful climate, our glorious weather, the productive soils all over our continent, rich mineral deposits, our cultural wealth, the human capital that's available in our 54 nation states and 10 dependent territories of the African continent, you will observe that we have managed to translate all this wealth to becoming the poorest region of the world. Poorest tribes, poorest people, with the highest infant mortality rates, highest maternal mortality rates, highest unemployment, lack of fulfillment in individual lives, on the national level, a failure of service delivery. Where in Africa can we get a steady supply of potable water? Anywhere where we have anything but epileptic electricity supply? How and why do we have the lowest GDP, gross domestic product, on the globe, in our nations? And the only thing that seems to be rich are the graveyards, where millions of Africans are buried with their full potentials totally intact, because the African experience is wired to destroy the development of the potentials of the African. All 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories of Africa, it's time for us to reflect in this new season before we rush into the fasting programs and those traditional things that we do every year. Wisdom is crying out to us in the streets, asking us to consider and reconsider a few things. As a matter of fact, somebody told me once that one of the definitions of insanity is to keep trying to get an unattainable result using the same failed strategy over and over again. And the more you fail, the more you get up to do the same thing, the same strategy, and only to receive that predictable result again and again. What most Africans do Every new season, new year, new dawn, new day is so predictable that demons, satanic forces, now prepare their budgets in advance by many months, waiting for the African nations to do what we normally do. Look, it is undeniable that the African nations and their nationals have all been relegated, all of us have been relegated into the role of the village idiot of the global community. We are merely tolerated by the rest of the world, considered a nuisance to many, ridiculed by the rest. They have said that we are emotive, intuitive, unscientific, and incapable of critical thought. Before jumping into this new year with unbridled zeal and misdirected energies, let us admit to ourselves that there is an engineered limitation hanging over the African experience. I remember once somebody made a racist comment around me. I was so chagrined that I rose to my full height. I was so annoyed, and I stood up to defend Africa. And he stood his ground and said, look, you people produce nothing, you're a backward people and all that. And I was so annoyed, and I kept saying, look, that's not true. I mean, for example, can't you look at a nation like, I needed a nation, I needed an African territory that I could use as my example, as a defense of all the Africanness that God had put into me. And I'll tell you something, I made a strategic exit that day, because listen to me, apart from the philosophies and all the political correctness of the world, it was impossible for me to lift up a wholly African example of a success that I would have loved to speak out that day. So much so is this limitation that there are even some so-called successes. But when you look at the so-called successes that we score on the African continent, that gives us such great pride, they actually translate into pitiful whimpers on the global scale. I recall one day, many years ago, I was traveling through an airport in one of the nations of the world, and I just had a little bit of time to spare, only for me to realize after inquiries that the total budget of that single airport in one city of one nation was much more than the total budget of my entire nation. And I tell you something, the budget of Nigeria in Africa is no mean budget. Yet here I was, one single airport had a budget much greater than that of the so-called giant of Africa. You see, sometimes the success with which you beat your chest on the African continent, when you bring it to the global level, you find out that the potentials available in the African experience only deliver extremely poor results. So what am I saying? Let us learn a lesson this year as we get started. This is what I am saying. As we step into this new phase, this new season, this new year, let us learn a lesson from the Most High God. We know that the secret of God's success has been traced to his thoughts processes. The scriptures have told us, Psalm 92 verse 5 have told us that God, his handiwork, can be traced to his thoughts. We find out his thoughts are deep. We find out that God outthinks everything in creation. God outthinks his enemies. God is in total control of thought. God never jokes with thoughts. And that's why when we put on the mind of Christ, if there's anything we're going to learn right now, I want you to take this fresh look before we begin to jump up, starting to make all sorts of New Year resolutions and plans that have predictable end stories. Now, listen to this. Everywhere and anywhere you observe predictabilities, operational consistencies, cyclical certainties, periodic repetitions, designed interdependencies, intricate mechanics, and functional exchanges. Anywhere you notice that, take this from me, you are dealing with a sophisticated program. And let's learn this by thinking with the mind of Christ, that wherever there is a program, there is always a programmer behind the scenes. I don't think it's coincidence that vegetation and trees utilize carbon dioxide for their operations, and then they exhale oxygen, as it were, into the atmosphere, while mankind draws air into our nostrils. We make use of oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. What you see there is a designed interdependency, a functional exchange. This tells us that creation is a divine program. And behind creation all around us, we have the invisible and invincible God. When we take this step further, we will see that mankind himself, red, yellow, black, and white, man is a divine program. Take away the color on the surface, all men contain the same machinery on the inside, as it were. There's no color or shade of man that has two heads. There's structural integrity in man. The skeletal frame is the same. Now, man is a part of that divine program of creation, and it is interesting that man is also permitted by the one who created the program of creation to also be a programmer himself within certain ambits. I don't want to take our time today because we need to pray. But when you begin to stretch this thinking with the thoughts of God, you are going to discover that the African experience is a negative program produced by negative engineering. What am I saying? The failures, consistent failures, predictable failures, design failures. Instead of interdependence, we have dependencies consistently. The failure of mechanics, the dysfunctional exchanges, and all the failures that you see all over Africa are just not natural. They are products of a program. Now, we're not going to be delving as to the engineers behind the program. We need to use the mind of Christ. We need to get smart so that this year, this season, we will be able to make some headway. Even before you pray, you need to use the mind of Christ. Even before we set targets, we need to use the mind of Christ. Before we embark on a 100-day fast that they had been predicting, demons are waiting for you to start it. Or 200-day fast that demons are going to rejoice when you announce. We need to do something today by going to the Almighty God to think the way He thinks, so that the results from Africa for a new generation will reflect a new level. We need to use the mind of Christ. Now, until we start thinking the way God thinks by using the mind of Christ, Africa will not even be able to see that we have been running through a program. There's a programmer quietly observing us. There is a program with which we have been made subject through history. Even though it's working all around us, if you're not careful, the program, this arcane program, is so clever that you will not even know and observe that there is a program behind the consistent failures. And I tell you something, I've observed this for real. The programmers who set these things into motion, they are with us on this planet, but they will never point to us that the predictable, consistent failure that Africa is experiencing is actually a result. Rather, they will keep quiet, and I have observed in many times that Africa is even grateful when those who understand the programs come back and offer us toxic aid packages, so-called help that will keep us in perpetual bondage. I can tell you something right now. Many African nations throughout this year will only subsist again. They will subsist on a lot of foreign aid. Many African nations. I don't need to wait till June in the middle of the year or wait till October. I can tell you from right now what the headlines will be by the end of the year for many nations in Africa. 54 nation states, 10 dependent territories. And I tell you something, the story of Nigeria is the story of Ghana. The story of Ghana is the story of Burkina Faso. The story of Burkina Faso is the story of Equatorial Guinea. It's the story of Gambia. It's the story of Kenya. But somehow we seem not to be able to see that in every African nation, what we see playing out is the same horrible home video with its useless plot, denigrating plot. The actors may change. There might be a little local flavor here and there. But believe you me, it is so obvious when we look through the mind of Christ that the African experience is the product of a wicked program. Now, at a certain level of this program, a number of African nationals in different African states, just to keep up a hopeless hope, have also been taught to create the illusion of what they call oases of sanity, hoping that one day there will be a joining of those oases to form an ocean. Now, you need to show us anywhere in life where that has ever happened before the mind of Christ will bother to pursue such lines of thoughts with you. Now, what they don't know is this: even that those illusions are used to encourage the hopeless to think there's hope in the directions where there is no hope. If you want me right now, without even looking into the spirit at all, I can tell you that at another level, I can predict and prophesy based on that terrible program that many thousands of Africans again this year will beam with pride and feel more blessed than their neighbors when they acquire second or third hand cars, overpriced cars, rejected in other nations of the world as unworthy to ply the roads. But there are going to be many African families really feeling good, really feeling blessed, feeling that God is really great because they've bought a fourth-hand, fifth-hand car whose prior owners never uttered a prayer before they acquired them. Rather, they got it through certain systems. You see, it is the fact that it is this negative programming that sustains the African experience. And it is fitted with these illusions that can keep the African nationals, irrespective of the nation where you are. It will keep you busy, deceived from your cradle to the grave, eating the scraps of life. Scraps dressed in clothes that are not even fit for purpose. And yet all this in the midst of the plenty that God has put into Africa. Listen, whatever is being used to make cars, is being used to make rockets, being used to make all the mud cons that you see today being imported into Africa, whatever is needful is available in Africa in its raw form. All that is missing is the mind that can put them together to demonstrate dominion. Now, the African experience is a product of an engineering system, a program that has put a damning limitation on the workings of the African mind. A man who doesn't even know that he has a problem. When on earth will he ever be able to realize that he is in need of a solution? Let's put on the mind of Christ this year as we begin to plan. You know, the brilliance of this evil program in Africa encourages the enthronement of religious and political leaders that will keep us in captivity. manufacturing motion while no progress is recorded. Oh, we need to pray. We need to pray. I was looking at one of the reports the other day, and let me quote an economic report. It says, in reality, 50 years after the beginning of the independence era, Africa's prospects are as bleak as ever. Already the world's poorest region, it is falling further and further behind all other regions of the world. Its average per capita national income is 1/3 lower than the world's next poorest region, South Asia. With the population rising to more than 1 billion, real per capita income is now lower than in the 1970s. Today, half of the population lives on less than $1 per day. Poverty levels in Africa continues to increase. Between 1981 and 2002, the number of people living in poverty nearly doubled. A UN report then in 2007 predicted that by 2015, Sub-Saharan Africa would account for almost 1/3 of world poverty, up from 1/5 in 1990. Although Africa possesses enormous mineral wealth, its entire economic output is less than 2% of the world GDP. Its share of world trade and investment is similarly minimal, less than 2%. I was Meredith Martin.
Radio 247.
We hope you have been blessed by this message. Join us next time for the concluding part of this program, Planning for Success. You can reach us on Facebook or tweet at us at MyPradio, or send us an email, contactpradio@gmail.com.
Radio 247.
Radio 247, non-stop prayers.